All right, welcome everyone. For those of you who joined us last week, welcome back. And if you are joining us for the first time, we're delighted that you chose to be with us today. On behalf of the Emerson Leadership Institute and the Chaffetz School of Business here at St. Louis University and our partner, ADK Information Services, I would like to thank you for joining us for our summer webinar series, Product Safety and Innovative Technologies. I'd like to take this opportunity to give a huge thanks to Amazon for their generous sponsorship of our program. My name is Beth Ann Yacobu, and I'm the Executive Director of the Emerson Leadership Institute. Don Kornblatt is the President of ADK, and he and I enjoy developing the series of 4 topics to help product safety professionals enhance their leadership mindset by examining new and innovative technologies. Today's session is Managing Data Responsibly, Tailoring Systems to Protect Consumers through Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning. To help us present and moderate today's session, Lisa Trophy, the Managing Director of the Juvenile Products Manufacturers Association. Thank you, Lisa, for leading us today.
Thank you, Beth Ann. And I am so pleased to be here for our second webinar of this second series. And once again, thank you to Amazon for your generous support and making this possible for our attendees today. I am very excited to welcome 2 superb speakers to share their expertise with you today. And before we get started and I introduce them, I'd just like to share a couple housekeeping announcements with all of our attendees. So we will be saving time at the end of both sets of remarks today for some questions and answers. So I would encourage all of you in the audience to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to enter any questions you have as you think of them, and we'll work through as many as we can at the end of today's session. We are recording today's session, so it will be available to you and any of your colleagues who may have missed out on participating live today on the Society for Product Safety Professionals website. So stay tuned for your email for a link to access that after the session. And finally, there is a very brief survey that you'll be prompted to take when you exit today's session. And if you could share your feedback with us on what you thought about today's session, that would be wonderful. We'd certainly appreciate it. So once again, please use the Q&A function to ask your questions. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Derek Snadoff. Derek is a principal with Deloitte and a recognized expert in artificial intelligence, trustworthy AI, cyber, and cloud, and is a frequent author and speaker on these topics. Derek currently is leading Deloitte's global product quality and safety market offering, and he holds leadership roles in the firm's strategic growth offerings, analytics and technology, and regulatory and legal support practices. Derek has a 20+ year management consulting and professional services career and is the recipient of numerous awards. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Derek. Thank you for joining us, Derek.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much for that warm introduction. And we'd like to start out and offer just a very big thanks, obviously, to Amazon for sponsoring this webinar series. And also St. Louis University and the Emerson Leadership Institute, and the fantastic team of Don, Beth Ann, and Jennifer for putting on the webinars throughout the course of the summer. And of course, inviting me to share a few thoughts from my perspective and Deloitte's perspective around product quality and safety, and particularly around data and AI ML uses as applied to that particular topic. And very much looking forward, Lisa, to the Q&A later, and Daniel sharing the stage with you today to share some perspectives on this topic. So just to give a little bit of a roadmap for the audience today, and thank you again for taking your time to be with us. It's really great to be here. Basically, you can almost think about us having 2 different segments of the session today. Mine's going to be definitely more conceptual. So I'll spend some time up front just kind of setting up a little bit of the need for AI and ML in the product safety space, and also giving you a lens or some perspectives on which to view your data assets as it relates to product quality and safety. And then take you through probably 5 or 6 different use studies or use cases or applications, if you will, of AI ML to product quality and safety. And you'll see that it really spans kind of the end-to-end process where you're able to deploy these innovations to drive improvements and better protect consumers. And then for the second half of the conversation today, I'll turn it over to Daniel, and he'll actually get much more into the applied space. So you'll see exactly how some of the kind of concepts and capabilities that I talk about, Amazon is putting into practice today and how they're using them to protect consumers. So should be a good opportunity for everyone that's participating today to get a sense on some concepts and also some real world applications where it gets brought to life. So jumping in here, I won't spend too much time on this particular slide just because everyone on the call here is a product safety professional or if not at least interested in the topic. So you've certainly seen all these headlines ripped from the newspapers and on the news, right, about just the impacts of a significant product quality or safety incident on a company. And seems like almost every day you open up a newspaper, turn the TV, you're seeing a new one coming out, and it really spans across industries. But what I think is really interesting, though, is up until I would say the last few years, really the way people tended to think about product quality and safety was almost like a shop floor issue, or it was managed by a small product safety team within a company. But I certainly have seen, and working with a lot of clients in this space, a real shift over the last several years to where product quality and safety now is really a C-suite issue. It's commanding the attention of the CEOs of companies and even at the board level, just given this is an area of obviously significant potential risk, but also competitive advantage. So we're seeing, kind of instead of being more of a, in some cases afterthought or secondary consideration, now it's really risen to the forefront, and it's even something that the C-suite is very honed in on. So talking a little bit more about just kind of what we're seeing across industries, like what is fueling all these additional safety incidents that we're seeing and that additional C-suite interest. Some of the challenges really are driven by the consumer. So their preferences are changing. They're looking for a lot more tailoring and personalization of products. A lot of the products now are, have practically little computers in them, and the complexity has gone up significantly. And then you couple that with, pressure to develop and turn out products much more quickly and source them from global multi-tiered supply chains. And then on top of that, factor in just the increasing regulatory and consumer scrutiny over quality and safety. You can see there's a lot of challenges for the product safety professional these days. And, some of the technology enablers that they have, aren't leveraging some of the innovations in AI ML that we'll talk about today. And, aren't really able to tap into some of those data assets that a lot of organizations maintain. So hopefully today will be a good chance, if you're working in this space, to give you some ideas and perspectives you can take back. But what's the implication, though, of all those various challenges that I just mentioned? First of all, we are seeing significant increases in the total cost of poor quality and safety. Not universally, some companies are doing this well, but generally speaking, they are on the rise. Based on research that we've done, and this speaks to the automotive industry, but really, I think you would find similar trends across a lot of different industries. Executives are seeing an increase in the number of defects over the last, number of years, even decade. But so they're, kind of defects and quality issues and safety issues are on the rise. And what does this mean for your customers and your consumers? Well, according to some of our research, 10% of customers that have a quality issue or a significant safety issue are going to leave the brand. So this is something that's important to get right. And And generally, the whole process around identifying through resolution of a safety issue continues to take too long. Just even the root cause investigation element is averaging, from our experience, almost 4 to 6 months. And you couple that with the time it takes to find the issue, not just get to the root cause of it, but then actually treat it, come up with the permanent corrective action, resolve it. Still we're seeing a lot of end-to-end resolution times that are, more than a year. And again, just increasing frequency and size of and publicity of recalls are driving a lot of, impact that you're seeing based on those challenges. So what are companies doing about this? I think what we're increasingly seeing is that, as I mentioned, quality safety is now a C-suite priority. But we're also seeing that, companies are moving now to, have more end-to-end integrated solutions that can drive more visibility into quality and safety problems. So less simple reporting or siloed approaches. They're trying to create things that manage the process more end-to-end. Certainly trying to infuse quality more into the design and prototype phases, so getting as early into the process as possible. But where we'll focus today are these bottom two topics over here. So investing in cloud platforms and then better leveraging data and using cognitive analytics. So those are some of, I'd say, the biggest changes that we've seen over the last few years is, and the topic of today's talk really is how companies are starting to aggregate their data together more, leveraging data that they never had access to in the past, whether it's through social media or from different field data or from Internet of Things, pulling all that together, platforming it on the cloud, and then being able to apply different AI and machine learning to better identify and respond to quality and safety problems. So that's where we'll dig in from here. Okay, so I think this is kind of, a useful lens to think about the data part of this story. So if you look there on the left, I would say this is really today how you still see many quality value chains set up across organizations. So you can see very linear and also as a consequence, very siloed in terms of the communication and the information flow and the data sharing. But what this causes here, when you look at this more kind of linear serial type of path, is it's not really optimized for today's quality or safety needs. And so if you look actually more to the right, this is really the model that we talk about with clients, and I think that more and more clients are gravitating towards. And less thinking of it as a step-by-step value chain, thinking about it more now as like an integrated network. So you see, a lot of this, it's all the same stakeholders, consumers, your design teams, your suppliers, manufacturing, logistics, field quality and compliance. But now what you see is that at the center of everything, and this is where the data piece comes in, everything is anchored around a digital core. And that's all your data that's brought together for quality or safety purposes. But now, rather than being, kind of siloed in any one particular part of the business, or not shared freely, or not, communicated broadly across like the different constituencies for quality and safety, that digital core is really the enabler that drives all of those different parties to better manage quality and safety. And it's not just having the data, but the data is kind of the foundation. And then, as we'll talk in a little bit, it's applying AI and ML to that data to create different types of insights and alerts for all those different stakeholders, is where the big breakthroughs are coming on the quality and safety front. So talking a little bit on this slide, I'll just kind of preview here. So for each of those different stakeholder groups, just what are some of the ways that they're leveraging AI and ML, to make improvements and achieve differentiation in the quality and safety space. So maybe starting off to the right on the consumer side of things. Some of the things that you see here is that, just listening directly to consumers around quality and safety topics. So having listening channels and sensing channels where your customers are and where they're talking about your products. And then also engaging it across different channels with them around quality and safety concerns. Then if you come and think about kind of the design stage, big one here actually is using analytics when you can to reduce unnecessary complexity, whether that's vehicles or other products. A lot of our research suggests that, what we call snowflake products, so more like one-off products, or ones that are more complex, maybe it's intuitive, but, drive a lot more of your quality and safety problems. So if you can reduce some of that complexity out of the design process, that helps you overall. And also like focusing specifically on product launch risk. This is when you're most exposed, most vulnerable products just, out in the field at the beginning. So really focusing your attention on those kind of early time in life issues. Then at a supplier level, it's important to understand, the type of product quality and safety risk that your suppliers are introducing into your products. And so like this is one of the kind of earliest things you can do is like if you can drive high quality with your suppliers for the components and parts they're providing, that helps provide better quality and safety to the end result products as well. And part of that includes just having better part to product traceability, so you understand which parts from which suppliers are actually going into your products, and so that way if there is an issue you can better scope a recall and better understand the contribution of that part to the problem. Then on the manufacturing and logistics side, big one here that, this is where a lot of the quality and safety focus has been over the years, but now there's much better capabilities to do it with Smart Factory and manufacturing 4.0 and being able to have now, IoT sensor data from handhelds, from PLCs, from sensors themselves, even video, other things are coming into play where you can better manage like the quality on the manufacturing line. And a key thing too is again, with that networked approach, now there's not silos between manufacturing and logistics and say field quality and compliance. Like there's communication, information flow between both, so that if something shows up in the field, such as a batch issue or a production period issue, that information can get fed back very quickly to manufacturing and nipped in the bud. And then the last piece just to talk about is field quality and compliance. So a lot of innovation going on here around AI and ML. So using cognitive analytics to help identify issues, better prioritize them, get to the root cause, remediate them. We'll look at that one in some depth next. And then also just using that sensor data too. Like so, many more products these days are having sensors directly on them in the field, and that gives you a great sense of the health of that particular product or piece of equipment. So taking that into your digital core and then using AI and ML can be really achieve a lot of benefit. So that gives you just a kind of a quick walk, if you will, through like, some of the key things that are going on with AI and ML using that digital core, but across industry. But now what I'll do is, just kind of do a little deeper dive into, say, a handful of different use cases and capabilities that leverage AI and ML, and that'll hopefully set up Daniel for his remarks in just a bit. So the first one to talk about here is your early issue identification or early issue detection capabilities. This is one that can definitely really benefit from AI and ML and actually automation as well. So a lot of companies find themselves looking for these issues, like digging through different reports, maybe waiting to hear like, a complaint from engineering or from consumers. Now it's possible actually to really run AI and ML literally on every product you have and every component and part associated with it, and be able to surface up to the top potential areas of concern that your analysts and team members can look into. A few key things around early issue detection to keep in mind is one, it's very important, and some of the breakthrough really comes from starting to integrate different data sources together. You don't need to go overboard in this regard. I've had clients that have had, we've helped them evaluate 20 to 30 different data sources, but you don't need all of those in your digital core to make progress and move forward. Like we typically try to help clients focus on just 4 or 5 that really have like the best signal and the best insight. But you do want to pull together different data sources and link them together, and that's where you can start to better pick up early signals. I'd say another key piece too is a lot of the really rich information for this purpose is textual in nature. So like, yes, you'll want capabilities that use AI and ML to look for, any deviations compared to statistical process control, deviations compared to survival analysis, et cetera. But tapping into that unstructured data, like what your technicians are talking about, what your customers are saying about the product, really can be very beneficial. And I think Daniel will talk more a bit about how Amazon is doing that. But ultimately, it's a matter of like bringing in algorithms that look for different types of quality and engineering capabilities, having ontologies that look for the right kind of safety words and smoke words and discussions, and being able to apply that against all the data you have using automation approaches and AML. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is achieve this benefit on the bottom here, right? So like the longer an issue is persisting, or the more like a safety issue is cropping up, and the later you get to it, there's just that many more products that are exposed, that many more customers that experience the issue. And so if there's a way that you can use these AML approaches to speed everything up, catch things faster, then you have a demonstrably smaller cost and customer impact too. So you're better protecting your customers by doing this. Now here, like this next set of capabilities or use cases to think about are really around, how do I prioritize the things I'm seeing though? Like, so I have a number of potential issues that are out there. Like, what are the biggest safety concerns for me? Which are the ones I should act on now? And so a couple of things where AI and ML really comes into play is really on the concept of alerting. So, as your AML like runs various analyses, what you can do is you can actually add a layer over the AIML that bubbles up to the top the ones that are most interesting for you based on your risk profile and other factors that you're considering. So like a good example though is, definitely if I'm managing a product line, I want to know right away if there's like a significant safety issue. So that can be part of the alert generation engine, is making sure that anything that's maybe has a personal injury aspect to it or health concern with it for a customer, like that should immediately come to the top of my prioritization list so I can act on it. But this is a place where AI and ML can almost, sort of like replicate some of the thinking that like one of your analysts would have in terms of how to look at, all the various outputs and bring to the top the ones that are of most concern. The other piece too is like, I need to be thinking about an issue that I'm seeing, not just based on the counts that I have of it now, but where are they going to be in 3 months or 6 months or a year from now? So another place where, analytics and AI and ML approaches come into place is really around projecting where issues are going to go in the future. So if you can see like on the chart here, right, like if I just assume that a particular issue is going to run on a straight line path, like I might respond in one way, whereas like if I have a better prediction that shows me actually this one's going to level off, I can be better responding to the right type of issue. So this capability for projections or forecasting is another big use case for ANML in the product quality and safety space. To touch on this one here, this is really around like looking external to your own company. So in addition to the data sources you have internally to help mine for quality or safety problems, a lot of really good information exists out in, on the web and in social media sites, maybe on your own company website, other storefronts, if you will, or user groups. And so here, the important distinction to make, when you're thinking about, monitoring social media and have listening for a quality or safety problem, is this is very, very different than, typical brand monitoring that a lot of companies might have. The brand monitoring is going to be more looking for, sentiments, like qualitative feedback around how people, like or don't like products. But what you really need in this space is, you want that almost like smoke word, or that have like an AIML based approach that's very tailored for quality or safety concerns. So you pick them up early on as some of them are starting to form, and you can connect them together and trend them and understand that, you're seeing something out in the public that gives you some concern. And to do that well, though, it's got to be very tailored for quality and safety rather than a general brand monitoring solution. Now, a part that often gets overlooked in this whole process, but where AI and ML can come into place is, it's not just about finding issues and, prioritizing them, getting to the root cause, but you also have to come up with that permanent corrective fix and then make sure it works and that it fully solves the problem. And so this is another great AI ML use case where you can set up solutions that will, monitor trends after a certain clean point is established or perceived clean point. And different approaches allow you to make sure that the failure rates are coming down like, at the pace and in the direction that you would expect them to. You also can create like alerting, like if a customer needs to come back in multiple times for the same fix or the same safety concern, you want to know that. So this whole concept of proactive monitoring of fixes is another key part of your AI/ML strategy for product safety. Now here's another one that's also interesting. This is thinking about your suppliers themselves. And again, AI and ML can help you almost like model out each of the suppliers you have. And you can see like in the graphic in the bottom here, just a simple way to visualize them, that kind of outputs all of the AML outputs is just kind of like a 2x2 matrix, right? And so here you can actually see, looking at a whole host of different criteria for particular suppliers, which are the ones for me that are going to, have the most potential to introduce recall or product safety concerns into my process. And that way you can do several things with that. One is more closely monitor those suppliers then. And if you're in a situation, for example, where you have multiple suppliers providing the same commodity, maybe if you have one that is causing a lot of risk for quality or safety issues and one that's maybe not, you can actually look to make trade-offs like that. But it is really important to think about this upfront because again, the more you can head off the supplier quality concerns, the more it won't affect your end state quality or safety. And then the last quick one to touch on is, it's very important also to have almost like a command center control tower that allows you to do a couple different things. Like, one is just to provide management visibility into all of the AI and ML outputs and how your overall quality and safety processes are working. And like, what are the top issues, those kind of things. So kind of having a good place to act on and view and understand your quality and safety posture is an important related capability. And then the other piece, again, thinking about this holistically and end to end is, once you have maybe identified that there's an issue, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure it's coming down properly, but if it involved you having to issue a service campaign or perhaps a recall action, you want to have a similar AI to help you manage that process and make sure that there's a workflow there. Your investigators are, making progress against a particular issue. You're issuing notifications when you have to. The AI is maybe like alerting you if something is getting stuck or the situation changes and requires like a change maybe to your recall campaign. So these type of sort of command centers that take the outputs of the AML are a very important piece of your capability as well. So with that, hopefully that gives just kind of a good framework for everyone to think about how AML and different ways it can contribute to product quality and safety. And with that, Lisa, I'll pass it back to you so you can introduce Daniel and we can hear more about how Amazon is applying some of these same capabilities to their business.
Thank you, Derek, for that wonderful overview. And I am certainly pleased to welcome our next speaker, Daniel Kingdon. Daniel's the Director of Worldwide Product Trust and Regulatory Compliance and International Compliance at Amazon. And in this role, Daniel leads the Worldwide Product Trust team, which is focused on shaping Amazon's safety narrative with both internal and external stakeholders throughout the world. So Daniel's going to dive a little bit deeper and talk about how Amazon is implementing all of the wonderful things that Derek just talked about. So Daniel, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming you can hear me okay and you can see my screen. Thank you very much for having me. So yeah, as per introduction, I'm Daniel. I've got a couple of jobs at Amazon. The first one is doing events like this, spending time talking outside with like-minded product safety professionals, regulators, industry groups, safety campaigns, to really to sort of help how shape the conversation on how we can safeguard customers who are buying online, and also to think about how technology can be used in place of traditional methods of product assurance and quality assurance and safety management. I think a little bit about my background is that I've been at Amazon for 6 years, and prior to Amazon, I worked in the traditional retail sector and also in manufacturing and supply chains. And I spent a lot of time with high-risk products and enabling those sales in lots of different international markets. And then when I came to Amazon, I realized that I had the same job to make sure that the customers were safe and the products were good, but I only handled about half of the products that were sold through the website. So it's through multiple different programs informed by product experts, risk experts, scientists, but engineered through technology that we can start answering that question. So I'm interested to talk about this topic a lot. I think it complements Derek's presentation really well, which was a fantastic broad overview of all the different mechanisms that you can use data and artificial intelligence and machine learning to help guide your decisions and your processes at scale. This presentation is a little bit more narrow. And so it's specifically about that topic. In one instance, how are we using machine learning to identify signals of safety that we should be acting on, and how do we use that information? And then very quickly, my second job at Amazon is I spent a lot of time leading the teams outside North America. Some of you may have noticed I have an English accent. I'm here in London, and I lead the teams in APAC, in the Middle East, all across Europe, India, and in Latin America. So my job is principally to make sure that the technologies and the processes that, including the one that I'm going to start talking about in a second when my introduction finishes, work locally with different languages and against different regulations. So global systems, but tasked on a local basis. So that's kind of my two jobs. Before I get stuck into the specific technology where I want to talk about machine learning, which is about how we ingest information back from customers and decode that as safety signals, it's worth just taking one moment to look a little higher out at the overall approach we take to safety and compliance on Amazon. The truth is, I could probably take a whole day or even a whole week to present all the different programs that we have, and we're just talking about one right now. But at a high level, those programs are proactive and reactive safety and compliance programs. The proactive ones kick in before an item is even listed on our stores. So if you're a selling partner and you want to sell through Amazon and you want to list a product, you're given a lot of guidance and help online through the portals about the laws and the policies that you have to comply to list that product. And as a seller, you take responsibility for making sure your product meets all those requirements. And there are a series of terms and conditions that you have to understand, including the really obvious ones, like we don't want to sell unsafe products. So in addition, during that listing experience to us verifying the seller identity, we regularly request safety information from sellers about the products they want to list to help us make sure that they meet the standards, the safety standards that we need, by region or by country. And that's another presentation in itself, like how we ingest that information, how we process that. But that's not what we're talking about today. In addition to those proactive safety controls, we have expansive reactive protocols. I don't really like the word reactive, but the point is it happens after the product's been listed, sometimes a few seconds after the product's been listed, but ongoing. These systems scan and scrape our stores every second of the day looking for problematic issues, products, offers, selling partners, any particular issue across those points. We're using, amongst other things, machine learning capabilities to stop Bad actors, selling partners we don't want on our platforms, or products that are difficult or problematic or unsafe or even recalled. Our technology can look across loads of different data points to detect unusual patterns from certain sellers or the items, or even in the relationship between the seller itself and the items they want to list. So machine learning specifically has a lot of benefits. It's a huge investment up front to get it right. You need to do lots of training of the models until you have taught the system what you want it to do and got the results you want out of it. But once you've made that investment, you can handle a huge scale. I mean, Amazon is a very large business with a very large selection, lots of customers. So we need to use technology like ML to operate the decisions we want to make at large scale. And it can handle a large volume of attempted abuse. It can handle patterns and behaviors that are not obvious to humans. We're looking at hundreds and sometimes thousands of different behavioral signals, including metadata to verify accounts, which is data about other data. We look for signals, lots of different signals, reported abuse, copyright infringements, and meaningful to this presentation, we're looking at a lot of customer feedback and customer complaints. So we combine all these factors and scores of others to do overall risk evaluations. And from there, automated processes, as well as processes with humans in the loop, experts in the loop, kick in, and the actions downstream of those processes are that we can pause offers, we can stop listings, or we can even shut down accounts, we can recall products, or we can put proactive checks in ahead of new listings. Those processes, I think Derek mentioned it on a couple of occasions, are constantly being refined. They're iterative. So our algorithms and our teams learn with experience, and that feeds back into our system. So the longer we're running these things, assuming you're maintaining their slow degradation as well, they do improve over time. Now our team is made up of all the skill sets that we need in the function that I work in. We have chemists and scientists and food technologists and product experts, but they're blending those with engineers. And that machine learning is critical to staying ahead of our challenge, the bad actors and the products. But it's the combination of engineers, scientists, and investigators that feed that system with the new information, which is what it makes it continually improve. So just digging down a level into signals, we listen to customers and the signals we can get from customers. This chart that I've put on the screen right now just shows the volume and the change over time of how we've been listening to our customers. This I've broken out the chart here between customer service contacts and also text-based reviews. So that's primarily product reviews, but it's actually up to 6 different sources of information where we might get feedback from customers. The lower chart here, the lower yellow line and the lighter blue section, that's the physical phone calls and the interactions with humans and customer services. And then the text above it, the darker blue section, is where we've been starting to mine information from public sources of feedback on our website. I think the shift to starting to rely more and more on the text that we have from our customers shifted in 2011, and today it makes over 2/3 of our overall feedback. One of the key points about that text, though, is that it's unstructured. If you call up Amazon and you have a complaint or you want to make a point about a product or any aspect, you might even want to ring us and tell us how great we are. But either way, the conversation and the context of that conversation is very obvious because there's 2 people speaking. When we're looking to look at text and pick out from that signals of potential safety risks, we need to start using technology and machine learning to understand how to extract that. And I'm going to go into that next. So here is a product review, not a good one. Those of you that have shopped on Amazon, you'll notice the format, the review, it's got 1 star. This product is a battery pack. So let's drill down into the technology that we use to synthesize the massive amounts of information we have. We're looking at something like 60 million pieces of individual customer feedback worldwide per week. This is a significant operation. As the underlying technology of us mining that information gets better, the scope and the precision of our compliance programs also improve. The point I want to make with this slide is that simple keyword searches are just not very effective. So if you look at this review, you can see some key parts to it. To extract the meaning from this review, we use natural language processing, which is a fancy word, NLP, to understand the structure of the sentences, like what order are the words in. That helps to understand the second part, which is the sentiment. And then also in relation to the product, what's the context of that sentiment? A lot of this comes into the sequence of the words. Technology is coding each of those words, turning it into a numerical value, and then identifying patterns when those values are in different sequences. If you look on this review, we've overlaid sentiment. So, you know, I've already mentioned this is a battery pack product. If you think about a battery pack product, difficult phrase to say, words like swollen, peeling away, and bulging, I mean, that doesn't sound very good, but you've got other words in that sentence also about protecting the inner contents and the hard case on all sides. You can feasibly construct a sentence which says, this product has a hard case on all sides to prevent bulging, and that wouldn't be a safety issue. But in the context it's been written, the customer is flagging a potential safety issue. And you can see on the right-hand side of the slide here, the system, this is a very basic look at the integers that are spat out by the text mining software. It's looking for where it has learned the words in this sequence previously have been tagged as a potential safety issue. And then it's flagging that down the system, and we'll talk about that in a second. So there's two other short reviews here. I think the point I want to make here is that both potential safety issues and confirmed not safety issues are very useful to train these models. We've got two examples here. They're both very important to train that model. We use the detected text as well as the product details. The product detail is a very key part of what the system is putting in context of the words it's reading, and the output of the decision, which is a potential safety issue or not a potential safety issue, to reduce the error of predictions in the future. So in this instance, we've got a Colt gun, which couldn't push anymore, the tube exploded, versus I'm glad it didn't set my desk on fire. In the first example, the customer is complaining about an explosion of the bathroom caulking item, which created a mess while they were doing their DIY. That's not ideal, but it's not a safety issue. And in the second instance, there's clearly much more concern. There are identifications and predictions where we have to be correct. Having both positive and negative training samples increases our precision. When our systems flag that an item can pose a potential safety risk, and we know that we've discounted any false positive flagging, so like false safety flags, one of two things can happen. If we have a very high confidence, all of these things come down to value points. When we reach that confidence value, the product can be immediately suppressed. An investigation continues. That might not be the last action we take, but at least at that point, nobody can buy that item. The second threshold is where the item is flagged for further review by one of our professional investigators. And these teams decide whether the item poses a risk or not, but it helps tag the system so it continues to improve. Our customer service teams and our processes that stem from feedback, both sent in manually or mined from unstructured text, are operating around the world 24/7, 365 days a year. If you leave a product review or a comment, or in the US, if you put feedback into the Amazon Go app, for example, our processes and teams are reacting to that feedback within about 10 seconds of receiving it. So we've devoted a tremendous amount of resources over time to detecting risks and taking proactive actions to identify and limit future safety risks. Now, this is a presentation slide that doesn't already work. I'm going to give it a go. We've now put some of this data in a 3D model just to help demonstrate the point in terms of proximity of previous signals. So I'm going to press click here. Here we have a cluster of training data. It's actually plotted on a 3 dimensions, customer reported concerns laid over them. The red dots are products with potential safety issues, and the green dots products without issues, and they are far enough away from red dots that we're not yet concerned. The yellow dots are products on the boundaries where we want to run deeper analysis. When we pull that detail away, we can start to see the relative distance between unsafe products or potentially unsafe products and ones that we've classified as safe. Other products nearby the red 2 dots would have an elevated risk profile, and other products near the green dot would have a reduced risk profile. If we get a new piece of feedback, which is red near the green dot, it might turn that yellow, and then that information would feed our next model. And that's how this process works at a simplistic visual level. Oh, it's done it again. Every time. So that predictive technology, getting a bit interesting now, we can use both historical, like previous, and present day reactive data to create a highly impactful set of proactive tools. We continually identify clusters of related items. When we see a red flag in one item, we know it will immediately link to other related items. How it relates is the detail, which then lets us proactively suppress those related items, and so we can investigate them further. This has been especially useful for items that have been newly added to our catalog, where we have only a few data points to guide our risk analysis. Our cluster process creates approximately 8 million unique clusters worldwide to date. So rather than store product pair relationships or look at product graphs, we actually take the whole data and we create boundaries amongst those clusters. And that allows us to quickly estimate the risk of new products which fall within those boundaries, which have no customer history whatsoever and no sales data whatsoever. So can you imagine every year we're listing hundreds of millions of new products. They're getting added to our stores around the world every year. And these are items that we've never previously sold, and that potentially wouldn't have been picked up by the traditional profiling techniques that I might have used prior to coming to Amazon, because there's no theoretical risk, there's no history of risk, and we have no sales history of those items either. And now this starts to turn into a predictive model. We're able to calculate most risk predictions before they've even been shipped to a customer. And we can remove those potentially unsafe items and investigate them before customers can even see them listed in our store. Now that helps give us confidence that what's for sale in our store is safe. So this is just one area that Amazon is working on. It's absolutely not the finished article, but I think as we've grown as a business and we've brought our compliance expertise and safety expertise into the teams around the world, it's something we're really, really excited about. It really helps us answer the question, how do we ensure safety of products that we're not handling in our physical supply chain? These are impactful initiatives. We've got measurable improvements and they really help enhance our customer safety program. And we're excited about how we can continue to grow in this space because it holds us a real path towards an even more robust and effective safety and compliance system. So I think I dovetailed quite well with Derek, and I think that hopefully that was interesting for you. And yeah, I'll hand back to Lisa.
Thank you, Daniel, for that wonderful deep dive into Amazon and the resources that you're using there. So I think that we have Derek back as well. And I would remind everyone, if you have questions for Daniel or Derek, to please use the Q&A function there at the bottom of your screen. We do have we have 10 minutes left, so we have quite a few questions we can answer. And we have one to start. So this one is for Derek. And the question is, what kind of dashboard do you recommend using?
So I think the questioner is asking about maybe the control tower solution or some of the other capabilities in terms of how you visualize AI and ML. My personal view is that the technology should just really enable your business process around product quality and safety. There's a number of different dashboards out there. Many of them like Power BI, Qlik, Tableau, D3. There's a number that are out there. I think all of them are very suitable and fine choices, but the key is to really set them up in a way that I think more than just visualizes data, but actually helps create a process that you can follow. So where you embed some workflow into it. You have like the right KPIs for managing quality and safety. I think getting the sort of the design right is the paramount thing. And then there's a number of kind of dashboard technologies that can help enable that.
Great, thank you. Next question for Daniel. And this one is, what NLP model do you use?
Historically we use TextMiner, which is relatively well-known software, but I think we've evolved beyond that now. So I'm a risk manager, I'm not a product manager, so I struggle to understand these questions like at a product level particularly convincingly, but I do understand that we're now evolving our machine learning so that we can introduce the ability to identify all of the aspects of natural language processing across different languages. We can cross-pollinate. We're not building models per marketplace, per stack. We're now able to take the intelligence. We've got an in-house vocabulary across something like 100 languages of a couple of 100,000 words, which are the most important ones across each language for safety. It's been an exercise and a journey to get to that point, because you can translate a word like burn that you might use in English, and that might have a word in, say, for example, Arabic. There might be a direct translation for burn in Arabic, but that might not be the word that you would use if you had an issue with a product. So I think over time we've evolved a lot of our in-house proprietary stuff. So apologies, I don't know the exact name of it. There's probably a reason they haven't told me.
Thanks, Daniel. Back to Derek. What's an effective way to identify issues when you have a product with a low shipping quantity and therefore not a lot of data to analyze?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of the AIML approaches I mentioned will still be effective and worthwhile, even with low shipping quantities or low volumes, unless you're to the point, right, where you have such low volumes that you can literally just, look at, a very small number of, warranty claims or, safety incidents. I mean, if it's very, very small, then it may not make sense to take advantage of AIML, but I'm assuming you have like a fair amount, and it's just maybe not as much as, say, like a large consumer product company would, or say like a large automotive company. And so in those cases, what I find like what we've worked with a number of clients just in your same situation, maybe it's like a heavy equipment manufacturer where they don't have large volumes, it's lower quantities, or maybe it's like a commercial HVAC company that, there's only so many HVACs they're putting in around the country. Some of the key things become a little bit more of the second step, what I talked about, the prioritization and the forecasting piece of it. Because what you want to try to do is, even when those first, like 1, 2, 3, 4 incidents come in, being able to have a better projection of like, which is the one where I'm just only going to see those 1 or 2, as compared to ones where, the rate at which they're coming in or the characteristics of how they're coming in suggest that this is going to be like a longer running problem. I would say that's probably where I would first focus, would be on your techniques and your approaches around prioritization and forecasting. On the issue identification side, there are some things you can do there too, just to pick up the very faint signals, not wait for, catch something when it's like a low, creating a little bit of smoke versus a big fire. And there's some techniques there that help you with the kind of very faint signal detection too, that could be looked at, but I'd especially focus more on the forecasting piece.
Okay, great. I think you both maybe touched on it a little bit, but could you, either one of you, perhaps expand a bit on what would your recommendations be for smaller companies or organizations who don't have a ton of resources to really get started with kind of taking advantage of this technology?
Daniel, do you want to take that one first, or would you want me to?
No, Derek, it feels like you're better positioned to answer that question. You probably have a better understanding of the commercial stuff that's out there for people to take off the shelf.
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the type of capabilities we talked about, needn't be, very expensive solutions or multi-year journeys to get them in place. I think one thing that I would definitely recommend is, work with the data that you already have, especially if you're like a smaller, medium-sized company. Don't wait until you have the perfect data or all the data is collected and you have a huge data lake, like, a year or 2 from now. I'd focus on what you have to begin with, and to use a word like that's often overused, like take more of an agile approach to this. But I would say think about that more though in like a modular sense of things. So like we looked at a lot of different capabilities today, but And there's multifacets to all of them, but if you're like a smaller, medium-sized company, start with the data you have and then and kind of like layer different pieces into the process over time. Because you can start to get like a fair amount of benefit with, just, several months worth of effort. And then, kind of layer on from there and almost try to layer in your capabilities in a way where there's a clear, like self-funding or business benefit that you're generating. So, as I bring this next piece online, it's going to help, create this benefit or create this better compliance for me and kind of keep stacking from there.
Just to add to that one, I think I'm not sure what the impression is of people, what Amazon's like from the outside, but I'll probably break from the pre-agreed script a little bit here and say, I can't tell you how many of our original compliance processes started on Microsoft Excel, to really prove the concept. Getting manual data dumps from customer services on contacts, etc. Fuzzy lookups, looking to actually prove the concept, etc. Obviously, today it's come a really long way, but even Amazon, you have to take a tech investment to build to acquire or to build an internal system to automate it, to make it faster process as a program. But you still need to be able to prove the concept in a very scrappy way. So I would say, in many ways, working at Amazon is like being a very small organization. When you're building your business case for wanting to put a new compliance process in, or any part of the business, you generally work on very scrappy tools that are available to you, available to most people within reach, etc. before you build the case. And obviously, I'm very lucky that we have volumes and we have the business case kind of backing when things work really well, and when you can prove that concept and you can link the benefit to customers, then you tend to get what you need behind you in terms of funding and extra resources and skill sets to help turn that from what was a tiny idea in a former food scientist head into a genuine tech strategy.
Thank you both for expounding a bit on that topic. And sticking with Daniel, does Amazon inform sellers why their products might be labeled as potentially unsafe?
It's a really good question, and I could spend another hour on it. I think if it's something that websites, online platforms, retailers online, whatever word we use, we tend to use stores. We do have an equal responsibility for our selling partners as we do for our customers. They are also customers in a way. We want them to sell through our stores. And if we make it too difficult for them to do so, then they'll go and sell their products through other stores. So it's competitive in both directions. And it is a real challenge in my world to think about the seller partner experience when you're actually dealing with risk. Sometimes you really want to execute bias for action and go fast on things, but then what you end up doing is ultimately making the whole supply chain probably slightly confused, which isn't a good thing. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of becoming brilliant at this. But if you're a selling partner and you're listing a product which we have determined through our risk process is high risk, we will explain what documents you need to list that product and why. And we have a seller partner services team that can, on hand to help folks to understand that better. And we're building better guidance, and we're also dropping in lots of third-party companies that can help, on a kind of regional by regional basis to help people with individual requirements. But I mean, it's a really massive. It's not just about dangerous products. If they want to sell something with a battery in it, and we're going to ship it within our fulfillment network, we need to understand its dangerous goods classification. If they're going to sell an ingestible item, then we might need a certificate of registration if we're selling it in a European market, if it's a food supplement, for example. So there's a whole myriad of cases where we need information from selling partners to enable them to sell those products safely, etc. And if we don't explain ourselves well, and if we don't communicate well, I mean, any of you people on the call here shop on Amazon like I do, which is like most days, you get emails from Amazon every day. And I don't know about you, but I delete most of them. And if we're using like really basic forms of communication with our selling partners, explaining what we need, etc., they're going to do the same. They're going to ignore it. So we've had to find much easier ways to coin Derek's phrase, dashboards where sellers can understand what we need, what information we need from them holistically across all the different compliance programs and programs beyond my scope, into tax, VAT, any other transactional piece where there has to be that relationship, making it as easy as possible to do that. Where we get in trouble is where we've taken products down quickly for the right reasons in the abundance of caution. And then, we go through a reinstatement process as we're figuring out the investigation, and we could definitely do better at that in some instances. And we're really focused on it.
Great, thank you. We are at time, but there's one more really compelling question here in the Q&A box. So I'd like to pose it to both of you for those attendees that are still with us. And perhaps the reason most of us are here today is to understand the answer to this question. So it seems like we are seeing two different product safety worlds. One, the one that you both shared with us today, and the other is the manufacturers that may not still be working in diving pretty deep in hazard detection. So why would you two say that some manufacturers are so far from the ideal that you both showed us today?
I'll jump in. I think it's a different world. I mean, I've been a manufacturer. I've worked in a risk role for a global brand, and full visibility of my supply chain, very small numbers of suppliers, countable elements of component parts, etc. I've worked in sectors where you have to do post-sales market surveillance. You have to be very sensitive to what you're selling and what customers are reporting on you, and those mechanisms have been quite binary and quite basic because they've met the regulatory requirements in terms of spirit, and there hasn't been any challenge to it. In the seat that I'm in, we're dealing with an enormous scale. So if I had the same ratio of team that I had in my manufacturing job at Amazon, I'd have 1 million people working on safety. If I did it by shipped units or by product type, etc. And I know Jeff wouldn't support that team size. So it's different problems, etc. But I do think there's a real opportunity to collaborate up and down the supply chain. So a little bit to my previous point on seller partner experience and explaining, why we need information, etc., or why products might have been suppressed. If we play that role in the supply chain and if we play it well, then I think there's a huge amount of information we can share for the benefit of the entire end-to-end supply chain. If we're detecting risks through the example in the presentation that I showed today, making that aware to manufacturers, then I think it'll start opening people's minds. We have the same intention, we have the same outcome, etc., but just having different points of view. I have a couple of cases recently where we've been working on signals of risk in a particular category, an electronics category, where the very, very large major manufacturers of these products that we've all heard of here just weren't aware of those signals, etc. And it really did spring up a fair amount of really healthy collaboration between maybe a brand that wouldn't necessarily have wanted to collaborate with Amazon previously, wouldn't have wanted to share too much information, but it became a very two-way conversation. And I think seeing both sides of that conversation, really bringing people together, etc. I don't think it's a case that everybody has to take the same huge investment in data management, but I think if the data is there, and the same conversation exists with regulators to a certain extent, there's a lot of information that sits in the authority domain that could be of benefit to the wider supply chain. We struggle a little bit with recalls, where authorities have concerns about products, and it's very difficult sometimes to understand exactly what product it is that they have a concern with. And so collaborating on that information and making sure we're acting on it quickly is to the benefit of the whole supply chain and customers, etc. So I would say there's two different worlds for a reason, but there's no reason why we can't share better across the whole end-to-end supply chain.
Derek, any final thoughts?
I'll just add a quick brief thought. I think the human side of this is challenging. Just the change management part, if you will, like just for people that have done quality and safety one way for a really long time. Building confidence and trust in the AI and the ML outputs compared to what I my gut feel around when I know that there's a problem or how I typically look at for quality or safety issues. I think that's one of the biggest bridges is just creating, and it's navigable, but you do have to kind of bring folks along for the journey so they can see how the AI/ML works in tandem with their own intuition and experience. but helps automate a lot of the busy work and maybe helps them focus more where they can, provide, more interpretation and their best expertise to a problem. But I think just that whole piece of like, status quo, I've always done it this way. Now this is a very different way of looking at it. That's like kind of the toughest bridge to cross. But once you do, then, it really makes a huge difference.
Daniel, Derek, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. It was incredibly valuable. And thanks to our attendees for hanging out for a few extra minutes. We certainly appreciate it. And I think we could keep talking for another hour at least. Big thanks again to Amazon for supporting this program, this webinar series. And our third and fourth webinars will both take place next week. So there's still time to register for those too, if anyone has colleagues who hasn't done so just yet. And just a reminder, there is a certificate of completion available for those of you who participate in all 4 webinars, and you'll receive an email about that information as well. So we hope to see you next week for number 3 and 4. Daniel, Derek, thank you so much. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.